right. Oh, we are live. We are here with Grove Sessions. My name is Max Price. I am the head of social media and marketing at Grove Studios. And we are here with an amazing guest today, Jotown. Very fortunate to have him here in the studio with us. We're here in our podcast studio. And we are happy to be here. Thank you so much, Jotown, for coming in.
It's a pleasure to be here. Now that I found it, now that I found my way here, in Ypsilanti, I'm
happy to be here in Ypsi. And what is you have some connections with Ypsi, so talk a little bit about your connection with this area.
Well, my big current connection is that the son I never had, my dear young man I've known since he was born, Dante Primo, is a Ypsi resident and big part of your hip hop scene here in Ypsi.
Yeah, shout out Primo, man. Primo beats on the track.
Yeah, Primo beat Dante.
Yeah, Dante's killing it. He's one of the best producers out here, if not, in Michigan entirely, man.
He's
been getting some dope placements recently.
Very proud of him. He's worked really hard for years. I mean, no one works harder than Dante. He's amazing. Every day he gets there and he works on his beats, and he's done it for years. He didn't just fall off a truck and He's worked hard to build what he has, so I'm really proud of him.
Oh, yeah.
But I used to work all around here, different parts of it. There's just about 20 minutes from here in Belleville. I had a gig for a couple of years at a place called the Roxy.
Nice. I live in Belleville. That's dope. I've never... Is that place still around?
Oh, no, it's a gas station now. It's a BP gas station.
Oh, I think was it downtown?
It's right by 94 and Belleville Road. Mm-hmm. Haggerty, actually.
Yeah.
And it was called the Roxy. It was a nice restaurant, and my band played upstairs, and they had a Joey's Comedy Club. In the 80s, the bass comedy was a big thing. There was a lot of work for comedy. Every comedians made a lot of progress in the 80s. There was just clubs everywhere to do comedy.
Yeah.
So I would sometimes MC downstairs for the comedy club, and then my band would play upstairs after the show. And and I did that for a couple of years. And Westland, I worked in the whole. Again, it used to be. I feel like an old fart. I am an old fart, but back in the 80s and 70s and even into the 90s, there was a lot of work in hotels for bands. And all around the airport, the whole strip, Romulus, Livonia, Westland, Wayne, there were hotels that had bands 5 nights a week in their lounge,
Yeah.
And they were terrible gigs because there's nobody there during the weekend.
Just in the lounge, just lounge, playing to nobody?
Playing to whoever was there.
Yeah.
Or if nobody was there. But,
yeah.
but the good thing was there were probably 30 rooms like that where bands could play. And if you're doing the only way a band gets good is if they play.
And they were paying you guys too?
Oh yeah. Those were the premium gigs in the area.
Yeah.
Hotel gigs paid, you can make a couple $100 a night per guy.
Yeah.
During the week.
Dope. Yeah.
And 5, 6, 7 piece band,
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of really good bands in that era because there was work.
And they were sharpening their skills,
That's how you get good.
Yeah. I mean, the Beatles played 10 years together, 8 hours a day or whatever it was,
Yeah, you don't get good if you don't play together. That's the hardest thing right now in the current, before COVID-19, but with COVID-19, it's really going to hurt a lot of bands is if you're not working, it's like a sports team. You can practice all the time, but if you're in the game, you're not really doing it,
Yeah.
And it's very hard. It's very hard for bands to stay tight when they don't play
Absolutely.
together.
And I mean, you talk about comedians too. It's like I've been getting a lot into comedy recently, and comedians, at least the serious ones, they know, they get on stage every night, because they understand that that's what they have to do to be able to sharpen that skill to the point where they feel comfortable with it. And as artists and bands and stuff, a lot of the time it's hard to get that many gigs to just be able to play 5 nights a week.
At this time it's hard, and again, and that's the biggest challenge I think to any band out there, young bands trying to make it in the music business and go to the next level, is how do you? I mean, everyone reads about Billie Eilish and recording a record in her bedroom with her brother, and becoming a star, but that's like 1 in a million thing. It happened for her. It's not going to happen for everybody.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, and she may be a fluke freak. Her and her brother.
I mean, she has her brother who's an amazing producer who's been grooming her to be what she is since she was very young. I'm sure.
Right. Well, I know it's a very supportive family too, obviously. But the thing is, until you perform in front of an audience, You know, I truthfully, I feel sorry for Billie Eilish because she really she didn't go on the road and paid any dues and learn how to perform, and she's got a hit. So she does gigs. I've seen gigs of her doing her thing on stage, and she's successful. So everyone loves when you're successful, but she's really trying to figure that all out now.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's because I always see like artists that get successful when they're maybe like late 20s, early 30s, when they've been able to like have that 10, 20 years of development. They're just at this whole other level than artists that a lot of the times get successful when they're, you know, a teenager.
You think about her right now, this summer would have been the biggest summer of her life for the concert circuit. She would have done all those festivals, and she would have played probably 60, 70 gigs this summer in front of huge audiences, and she would learn so much in this year about how to perform because she doesn't know. And she's good. I'm not saying she's not good, but she doesn't know because she hasn't done it.
Yeah.
And usually it's the other way around. Usually a band plays, you know, they call it paying your dues, man.
Yeah.
I just saw an interview with Bob Seger. He was talking about when he was in the 60s before they were successful and they had a gig at a strip club. I've played strip clubs too, okay? They used to have live bands in strip clubs.
Yeah.
And you would play the good strip clubs, there were no DJ, it was a band. And that's how you were paying, you know, a higher level strip club. And he talked about playing 5 nights a week at a place like that.
Yeah.
And he wasn't even at a good strip club.
Yeah.
You know, he's talking about the girls were all old and they were not the top shelf, but it was a gig.
Yeah. And he was getting up there, he was doing it.
And that's called paying dues. You play. I did it back in the early '80s. I had a record that was out and a label that was supporting the band a little bit, and we went out and did a selected little tour. We were in California. We went to a couple states.
What was the band?
The band was the first iteration of Jotown, which was me.
Yeah,
you know, it was a solo gig.
Yeah,
but you know, we're doing this gig, and it's at a truck stop. It's in California, near Tijuana in Southern California. And it's the place where all the Mexican people who come to America to party on the weekend, and then they wind up at this truck stop in the middle of nowhere, and they're all puking and sick and, you know, passing out and sleeping. And it's like a football field size outdoor venue with like sheds with covers, and you play. And they got poker machines lined up on one side of it under a thing, and some guys are gambling, and nobody gives a crap about the music.
Yeah.
It's a gig, and you know how tours go is an agent will book you as many times as they can. So you work every night, and you might do the great venue one night, and then a real crap venue the next night.
Yeah,
and that was the gig. And my band was not really unhappy because it was not the best situation. Nobody was cared. No one was paying attention. And I said, hey, you know what? There's a guy on that poker machine there, 200 yards away from us, that probably hates the band because we're too loud, but because I'm coming from a place of love, I'm curing polyps in his colon as we speak. And I don't care if I get any applause. I don't care if the audience goes nuts because they're not going. They could give a damn.
Yeah.
But we got paid to be here to play. If we're going to play, let's work on some, like a paid rehearsal, and let's have some fun, and let's be thankful we're getting paid to play.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, a lot of musicians have this fantasy about adoring fans and stuff, but you get that over time. You earn that. You pay your dues. And for young artists, again, like even Lady Gaga, you talked about her earlier.
Yeah.
When she came out, I didn't like her much. I thought she was a fake, you know. And then I looked into her background, and she was playing piano and singing. She was doing the Tori Amos, what's the other one? Sarah McLachlan thing in the 90s, trying to, when she was really young, trying to do, because that's what was cool.
Yeah.
And she was playing clubs, and there's this video of her, you know.
Yeah, she paid her dues. She spent her time.
For many years. And, you know, there's an astrologer in New York that I used to know pretty well. And she was telling me then that Lady Gaga would sit at the piano at her house and play show tunes, Broadway tunes. You know, she had a fake book and she would play Broadway tunes and sing them. She goes, she's the real deal. And that's when I started listening to her a little closer to figure out what it is. But even her, when she first came out and had success, you know, she fell a couple of times. There's some really embarrassing video of her because she had never done that, and she had to learn, and she's learned it well. But she's paid a different kind of dues in front of the public's eye.
And I totally understand why people, like, at first glance, like, you might seem it's like fake or like just put on by the industry because of like the marketing and her crazy just stunts that she's done over the years, you know. But then you see her sit down at a piano, nothing but her voice and the piano, and you're like, oh no, this is like the real deal.
But you know, both things can live together. I mean, when Eminem first came out, he was very controversial. He was known to say crazy things. Madonna was known to do crazy stuff. Elvis, I mean, when he was first on TV, they didn't show him from the waist down. I mean, controversy is a good thing for an artist because it gets your name in the paper. And the old saying is, there's no bad publicity, just spell my name right. You know? And if you get a lot of exposure, crazy stuff gets. Michael Jackson, when I had a stroke recently, and I was doing oxygen therapy, and one of the technicians was from California that worked at this place, and he was in the 80s when Michael Jackson, there was a magazine cover of him. He bought a hyperbaric chamber allegedly to sleep in. And it was on it was on all the it was big news. Like he's crazy. He sleeps in an oxygen chamber, and he didn't. He just had a picture taken in an oxygen chamber.
Yeah.
And his publicist made up the story that he slept in one, and people talked about that for 3 months.
Yeah.
And it's publicity. And
Yeah.
Michael Jackson knew that controversy sells.
Yeah.
And controversy gets your name out there.
Oh, absolutely.
And artists, politicians, they know this. You know, don't forget about me. Keep doing crazy
for sure.
shit.
I mean, one of the biggest artists in the world right now, Tekashi 6ix9ine. I don't know if you know who that is, but
I do.
Pure controversy. You know what I mean? I mean, his music. You listen to his music. Obviously, it's quality. You got to have the quality music, but you know, it's the reason he is where he is because pure controversy. You know,
Ozzy Osbourne allegedly bit the head off a bat at a concert, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's always these things. Jim Morrison from The Doors. The movie is, if you ever see the movie The Doors, the whole story is he got busted on stage for obscenity, things he was doing, and he was drunk and radical. But that publicity made the Doors the bad boys of rock and roll.
Yeah.
And people loved him that he was irreverent. So, you know, controversy is not a bad thing. It's a device that'll get you publicity. And I mean, right now, you know, I have a song I recorded. I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to promote it and do all the things to get more people to hear it. Now, if I hijacked an airplane or, you know, robbed the store, put a gun to someone's head and say, put me on the news or else, you know, that would get me on TV. I mean, the reality is it's really hard in the current environment unless you're doing something kind of crazy to even get,
for sure.
or something like, for example, Billie Eilish again. She was a young kid that recorded the record in her house.
Yeah.
And that's a story. It's
and
a
I
cool
mean,
story.
it was you know, an interesting story because she was literally like 13
Right.
with this amazing voice and production. It's like, what's going on here,
Right.
you know?
And that's a story.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's weird. Back in the day, there's a famous story about Roy Orbison, you know, Pretty Woman, the guy that did Pretty Woman, and Buddy Holly, their first record, when they really became stars. Both of them, there's a story, an apocryphal story, that some DJ fell in love with the song and just locked himself in the control room and played the record over and over and over, and then they had to come get the cops to stop the DJ from playing the record. And it got on the news. And, I mean, it's controversy, you know?
Yeah.
It got attention. It's always finding a way to get yourself heard above the noise is very hard. And the story is, back in those days, a record... Van Halen wouldn't even do videos initially, you know. In the 80s even, groups wanted to have a mystery about them, you know. And the radio still ruled. You would hear a record and have no idea what the artist looked like and just fall in love with the song. And in our current environment, that doesn't happen anymore. Now, the video is as important as the song.
Absolutely.
And that's the way it is. If you have don't have a video, no one will hear your song.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they want to see the visual. I mean... Kids these days, they're very visual with, you know, TikTok and Instagram being video and photo-based platforms. You know, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why, you know, kids aren't really on Facebook is because they don't, it's all blue and white. There's just words without pictures. Like, it's not as pleasing to their full tactile experience, you know, when there's no moving pictures involved.
In 2008, I was trying to raise money to create a social media thing, and the joke name was Old Face. Because Facebook, I already knew in 2008 that kids were already leaving Facebook.
Yeah.
Because when your parents are at the party, you go somewhere else. And when your parents get on Facebook, the kids leave Facebook.
Nope. Yeah, they don't want to be. You don't want to be in a party with your parents.
You want to be with your friends.
Yeah.
Right. So technology does the same thing. Facebook. I read somewhere out there that in 10 years, 90% of Facebook will be dead people.
Yeah.
Who don't. You know, their profiles are still up there.
Yeah, they're stuck.
and there'll be a billion people on that platform, and the platform will be viable.
Yeah.
But the reality is that young people always want to find a place where they can hang out where the old people aren't.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
so all these things have shelf lives. And
Absolutely.
in the end, Billie Eilish, she had a story.
Yeah.
If you watch the shows now, the Star Making Machinery is a great song by Joni Mitchell, A Free Man in Paris, about Clive Davis. It's a song she wrote about him, and she says he's talking about how he would love to just go hang out in Paris, but he's got to stoke the star-making machinery behind the popular song. And Joni Mitchell was huge, but she was not someone that did a lot of media, that did a lot of those things. Her music is what pushed her, And now the reality is you have to, these American Idol shows create stars for us now.
Yeah.
The Voice, all those shows, The Masked Singer, whatever, they create stars, because if you're on TV 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks in a row, you are now a celebrity.
Yeah.
And now a label will say, okay, I don't care if she can sing, she's famous.
Yeah.
Or he's famous.
Oh, for sure. I mean, because there's no more of the, like, those mainstream channels like MTV or whatever that used to be the star-making machines. Those are no more. And now it's privately owned channels that have millions of followers. And if you're the owner of one of those channels, whether it's on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whatever it is, if you're the owner of a channel that can reach hundreds of thousands, millions of people, the label, that's where they see the value. You know?
There's a new show that came out this year. Carson Daly had that show on NBC for like 25 years. It was after everything else, the late, no one gives a shit show, 2 a.m. There's a new girl. Her name is Lily Singh. She's an Indian girl from Toronto. And she is beautiful. She's gay. She's bisexual. But she had a YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And she became this huge sensation on YouTube, where she made her own videos in her apartment on a she didn't have no gear. She just had the camera on her computer. And she created all this content. And that's her job now. She's now the late show on NBC. Mm-hmm. And it came directly from social media, because the suits now, the networks, the people that have the money to do things, if you've got a channel of followers, you have cachet in their eyes.
Yeah.
And they're willing to take a chance on you, because you're going to bring people to the picture. And that is the new reality. It's again, like American Idol is one level of it, but personal channels is another level of it. But it's still the nut to crack, the thing. How do you get 1 million people to come watch your shit on YouTube?
Yeah, and then retain them and make them a part of your tribe.
How do you do that?
And keep them coming back. Next month, when you release another song, they come back and you actually bring more people. Then the next month, you release another song, and it just builds and builds and builds over time. How can you consistently, grow your following, as opposed to, like, the days are really over of being able to release, unless you're a very famous artist, they can release albums. People are going to listen to the whole thing, But if you're trying to make it, trying to break as an artist, releasing a 12, 19-track album or whatever it is, it's going to be really hard to get everybody to listen to that full album, But if you instead of releasing 10 songs at one time, if you take those songs and spread them out over a year, release one every month, and slowly, build your tribe, get people over to your website, get people over to your email list. That's how you're going to actually build consistency and build people that expect something coming from you and are waiting for it.
Well, that's the goal and the fantasy of every band I know. And the thing is, figuring that out. If Max can figure that out, you're going to be a millionaire, because everyone's trying to figure that out. Because everyone's doing it, and only, like, for example, Lily Singh, the woman who's got Carson Daly's show. There's probably there's thousands of people doing what she was doing, their own little show from their bedroom. Mm-hmm. Now, why did she's beautiful, and she's funny, and she's real witty, she's fast. Mm-hmm. She's got the right demo. She's female. She's brown. She hits a lot of squares, and here she is. But why did people respond to her little podcast versus the thousands of other ones that get 5 views or 10 views? Mm-hmm. And that's the intangible part of luck or grace or whatever it is in show business that gives someone a little bit of leverage. You got to do. Everyone's doing all the same things.
Yeah.
But yet some people are going to make it, and most are not.
Yeah.
So figuring out how to leverage that is the ticket. If anybody can figure that out, any artist. And the fact is, in 2020, artists have to figure it out themselves because there are no real labels and there are no real managers for most people.
And if you let a label or a manager figure it out for you, because there certainly are some labels and managers figuring it out for artists out there, you know, blowing them up, things like that, but then they own you. And they own everything. You know, you're gonna get the short end of the stick if you're putting that in someone else's hands.
But that's been the story of the record business since the 30s when it started. It's always been the case. So, you know, right now, again, it's a unique time because there's no physical media product to sell. Streaming doesn't pay crap. And you build a brand and hope that you think about this. All these people that, okay, there's no money in records. And I've heard this I wrote an article in 1999 when I first saw Napster. And I said the record business is dead. It's going to die because if you're giving music away for free, there'll be no music business. And I knew that it was a good article because I got more hate mail than anything I ever wrote. And it was mostly musicians who hated it because they loved the idea of the internet that would give everyone a chance to put their music out there. And I would say to people, I'd say, well, dude, if you conquer a country, you don't blow up the airports and the railroad tracks and the ports and the freeways. You kill the people and you take over the infrastructure. If you kill all the machine of the record business that makes money for a lot of people now, there'll be nothing there. Then what do? And really right now, I looked this up earlier and I was running late to come here, but I think it's a $50 billion industry that the music business is, or more than that even.
Yeah. I mean, even like Live Nation by itself makes close to like $20 billion or so, or even more. And that's the scary thing about this time. And obviously, I think the music industry has plenty of money. They'll be okay, you know, but live music is 90%, if not more, of the music industry's income. I mean, that's where they make their billions.
Well, think about it. This is the lie that's been told since when I wrote that article in 1999, and it later got printed in the Metro Times in 2000.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
The myth was, well, you know what? Bands will make money on the road. They won't have to make money from records, so music will be free. And some artists started giving their music away as early as 2001, 2002.
Yep.
The idea that if I'll give it away, and then people will come, and then they'll pay to see me play in concert, put money in concert. Well, say you did all that right, and you got 1 million, 2 million followers on YouTube, and you did everything right, and now COVID comes and there's no concert tour.
Yeah.
So now what do those groups do? And there's no streaming services pay such a small royalty to artists. It's a built-in screwing that's just occurred this last year.
Yeah.
That's legal now. And it's really hard for songwriters, producers, anybody who isn't able to monetize their image. And those were the backbone people behind the industry for most of the industry's life. Writers, back in the day, writers wrote, producers produced, musicians played. The artists were working with the label they figured all that out for somebody. And a lot of folks made a living off of that.
Yeah.
And now that doesn't work like that. Now you have to be a one-man, one-woman machine that can do the music, can do the mastering, the mixing, the marketing. How many people do you know who can do all that themselves?
Yeah, it's tough, and the problem is there's so much to learn about the different aspects that when the people that do know all those things, it just takes a long time to nail down all those aspects of the industry. Like, I mean, I spent a few years learning audio engineering. Then I spent a few years just focusing on writing and a few years focusing on marketing and social media. And so now, I have a good broader view, but it took me, the past 10 years of constantly doing different things to be able to have skills in audio engineering and producing and doing social media and marketing and the music business in general. There's a lot to learn about. I used to not even just know how the music business really worked. I didn't, and a lot of people just think you get signed to a label and then it's all good, all gravy from there. And when I have a music business degree, bachelor's and a master's, and what I really just learned during that time is I don't want to just, give up ownership to a label and only get 20% of my royalties and blah, blah, blah. I want to build my own platform where I can have ownership and then maybe eventually partner with a label with like a 50-50 kind of deal thing where they help me with their machine, but I still have ownership and I'm still making a good chunk of the income because you have leverage. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the hope. It goes. I mean, I'll tell you, a great movie is Ray, the Ray Charles movie with Jamie Foxx. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know this, and they see the movie, they don't remember it. But Ray Charles negotiated a deal with Atlantic Records back in the 50s, where he got to keep his masters. Mm-hmm. Even Sinatra.
Way back then. That's
even
crazy.
Sinatra was not good. And in the movie, the guy even says that, you're crazy. Sinatra don't even get that. You know why Ray Charles got that? Mm-hmm. He was slick, but he could write his own songs.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra was not a writer.
Oh, he just sang.
Or a producer.
Yeah.
He was a singer. They had arrangers. They had band leaders.
So he needed that. I mean, he needed them kind of,
And Ray Charles could, he was blind, but he knew how to get 20 guys in a room and make them play a certain way, and he could write songs. He was a huge star at the moment, at that time. But the reality is that everybody wants to be in that. He had leverage, is what he had.
Absolutely.
And Atlantic was stealing him away from another label that had made him big in the 50s. And they were trying to sweeten the pot. But the average artist starting out has no leverage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even if you have like 20 songs on your YouTube channel or whatever, the only leverage is if someone values those songs.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, it's an interesting time where, again, you know a lot about it and you've learned a lot about it and you've acquired a lot of experience, but still the luck, the intangible things happen.
Absolutely.
And how do you do that? And the truth is, you only do it if you love what you're doing and you believe in what you're doing. You're going to do it regardless you get paid or not.
Yeah, and if you're not, like, if you don't love it, if you're not doing it regardless whether you get paid or not, then you're not going to be ready for the opportunity when it arises. I mean, the last 10 years of my music career, I barely made any money off my music, but I did it because I knew I had to get to a point where I was, where I could compete with the real music industry. I didn't want to release music that wasn't competing with the records that everyone else was listening to, So I knew I had to put that time in and figure it out. But you have tons of experience, in the music industry, going back decades. So I would love for you to talk about that a little bit, your experience, with the Motown bands and stuff like that.
Well, I was very fortunate when I came on the scene. It was already the end of that era. Is in the 70s already. Motown had left Detroit and went to California. And when it left, it took a lot of the industry with it. Because Motown was huge, a huge thing, a machine, a company.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of the cats around still from that time that I got to know. I used to do demos with a guy called Barrett Strong, the guy that wrote Money. The best things in life are free.
Yeah.
Barrett Strong, who just got screwed out of his royalties for the rest of his life by Motown. Because after 40 years when he wrote those songs, you can apply for someone's copyright. And legally, you have to notify them. And Motown's done this with almost all of the writers that wrote back then, is they just have claimed all those copyrights. And, of course, Barrett Strong never got notified. He's an old guy. And they stole his music, too. So
sad.
But the truth is, I have a quote. It's somewhere. I'm paraphrasing it. It's a Hunter Thompson quote. It's in my guitar case. It's in my studio. And it says, "The music business is a snake-lined plastic money pit full of vipers, killers, people who would sell their child for a hit record."
Yeah.
And there's a bad side, too. So it's been known for the whole history of the music business that the guys with the money are exploiting the artists, and only the artists who are smart enough to figure it out are ever going to. I would like one of these conversations to talk. There's one, the Carter family. That's the genesis of that country, Ken Burns documentary series. They talk about all those groups, but the Carter family was a bluegrass group, and because they were smart, they figured out how to pimp the machine. Mm-hmm. They figured out how to do it. They figured out that if you find these old bluegrass songs and you change the words, you can re-copyright them and you can own them, because they realized that the money comes from owning the copyright to the song.
Yeah.
And so one of the I can't think of his name, it escapes me now, but June Carter's husband, he would go all around that part of Kentucky and Tennessee and find these old people and have them sing these old songs, and he'd learn them and then go home and rewrite,
copyright them,
do new lyrics to them and copyright them. And those were the songs that the Carter family would record because they would get more money if he figured that out. He was a Southern guy that couldn't read or write, but he figured out that if you don't own the songs, you don't get paid.
Yeah, and I mean, the music industry also is notoriously a copy and paste machine, figure out what's working and let's do that until it doesn't work anymore.
And that's why, in most of history, pop music is usually the lowest common denominator. It's usually the worst crap out there. And like, what's this Shark song? What's that song? Baby Shark.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's not new. This is as old as time. But every now and then, every generation, an artist will come forward that just happens to be really good, that is doing something really well, that becomes popular.
Yeah.
But most of the history of pop music is crap. Right now, if you look at the top 40, whatever it is, when we're done here, Google it and write it down and see how many of those artists are around in just 5 years who still are viable. And if history is right, and it usually is, it'll be a whole new group of people in 5 years. Most of the 1 out of 100 of the people who are big now will still have a viable career.
Yeah.
Most will not.
Yeah.
And it's there's a lot of factors that go into that, and talent's one of them. And but there's a lot to it that allows grace and providence and luck is an ingredient you can't order online.
Yeah.
But again, you do the right things. Back when I first started out, there were probably a couple hundred record labels in Detroit, small little labels, and they were all looking for. And at that time, singing groups were big in the black music, and rock bands were big in rock music. So they were looking for these garage rock bands that didn't know anything, like the Romantics or like the Stooges or Bob Seger, whomever. And they were looking for those groups because they could record a record without hiring a band, and they could make a record real quick, a local record. And they did the same thing with vocal groups. They'd find some guys that can sing, and they have a songwriter, and they do a song, and they'd go around to the little record stores and pay off the record stores to report the song selling well, and they'd even buy a few records. One of my first managers, Jerry Goldsmith, he would take me to all these little record shops in Detroit, and he'd buy 10 records cash, and he'd slip another $50 into the hand of the owner of the store. So he'd report to the radio stations, this record's really selling. And it was really selling, even though it was a lie.
Yeah.
But there were 100 guys doing that in Detroit in the 70s.
Yeah.
And in every city in the country, there were 100 guys doing that same thing.
Yeah.
They're playing the lottery by recording groups and making records and hoping they got lucky and got a hit. So it has always been a lot of people out there, talented people who don't know how to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And now the tools are in place, and of course the Grove does this to teach people how to record music and how to make a record and how to build some kind of career. Information is power, if you know what you're doing. And as we spoke earlier, the COVID-19 has killed the record business. It's killed the music business, the touring business for everybody equally. From the local bar.
Except for people that have been able to, there's some people that have been doing like drive-in tours and stuff like that,
Right.
which is kind of cool.
But most of those people are artists that are pretty big.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you and I,
for sure. You got to have money behind you to do something like that.
You and I would have a hard time doing a Max and Jotown show at the Fort
The
Wyoming
drive-in.
Drive-In. We would not have the leverage to get that gig.
No.
So, again, the rewards go to those that are already connected to the resources to get in a drive-in thing. But this is not going to last forever. And in the meantime, again, how does anybody not go crazy and find a way to survive, just a band to survive this era with no live gigs, and hopefully focus more on their next record and their original music and their style. And, I bet you in the next couple of years there'll be a lot of amazing music that hits the scene in 2021, 22.
Absolutely.
Because there'll be a lot of work has gone into some artists that have really worked hard refining their sound, recording 20 songs to find the 2 songs that actually define their style.
And a lot of the time, too, hardship, can breed some of the best music, and so during this time, a lot of people are experiencing hardship, and I know that artists are putting that into their art,
The biggest challenge for every artist in any medium, I don't care if it's music or painting or sculptor or whatever, writing, is getting paid.
Yeah.
Finding a way to get paid for the art. And the eternal struggle of the artist from the first guy that carved a rock is how to get paid for it.
Yeah.
And so, that's the biggest challenge
tough.
for artists now, is that is those that focus on the future, the next year and a half, 2 years down the road, of how they will position themselves in a place where they may have a chance to if they can survive the next year and a half, 2 years, to where they'll be ahead of the game. But in the meantime, it's a real challenging time, and I hope that some good art comes out of it. I mean, I've written the first song since my recent stroke that I finished, and it's about this time. It's about what happens in this time if people can take the opportunity to heal in this time. And my song, my America song, it's about that. The purpose of it was to heal some kind of division and hope. It's a grandiose thing, but to think my song could help heal some division. But there's going to be a lot of healing that needs to happen after the COVID thing is over. We're going to, it's going to be a lot of healing that's got to occur.
Absolutely. And we are so divided right now, more divided than we've ever been, you know what I mean? And that's why I really like your song, because it is like the message of the song is, it's called "What Kind of America Do We Want to Be?"
Question mark.
Yeah, question mark, because it is a question, and it's something that we need to decide. And it's also something that isn't, it's not on either end of the spectrum. It's right in the middle. It's saying, let's come together and let's be better.
Well, I worked really hard in the lyrics to the song to not be a partisan song and to not be a finger-pointing song. In fact, the first 2 or 3 versions of that song, I was saying a lot of the same things in a different way. And, the Socrates, the great Greek philosopher, the Socratic method is to teach the students by asking questions rather than telling them, this is this. He would ask a question of the student, and in answering the question, the student would learn the concept. So asking a question is always a better way to not offend somebody, because you're allowing them to look inside and think about it, rather than telling them they're wrong for what they already think, or that you know more than they do for what you think. And a question is always a great way to just respect the listener, to say, hey, what do you think? And so that was the goal, is to make it a question song. And I do truly believe that most people are good people.
Yeah.
And when you take the politics out of it, which is really hard to do, but when you do, and what do people agree on? What do we all shared values, that whether you're Republican or Democrat, whatever shirt you wear, red, blue, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that most of us agree on. And the goal of the song was to try to hit as many of those things as I could, so that people, and the good news is my Trump friends love the song, and my liberal friends love the song too, because I'm talking about American values, not about politics.
And deep down, we have much more in common than we are different, and I think also, like, the problem with social media and how, when you like certain things on social media shows you more of those things. So the way that media is set up right now, it kind of it promotes both ends of, like, the extremes of the spectrum, and it seems like that's how everybody is, but really that's just what we're seeing through the media, and a lot of people, I'd say probably most people, fall more kind of in the middle, or they're not, the majority of people do not fall on those extreme ends of the spectrum.
Facial recognition software, what it does, the reason it works at all, is it looks at a face and it compares what's similar, it compares what's alike, and then it takes the things that are really extremely different and then assembles really quickly a model that can align with another face in the database. The brain, this is how we learn, or how we get information, is we have to assess really quickly and fill in the blanks. What's not there. So you think of a face, there's a nose, there's eyes, there's a mouth. Everyone's got those. Okay, so a facial recognition program, it starts with that.
Yeah.
What's common? Nose, eyes, mouth, and then jaw and ears. It expands it. But the human brain learns by seeing what it knows, it already knows, and it fills in the blanks around that. And social media, what it's done is accelerated the speed with which misinformation can spread around.
Absolutely.
There's an old saying, a lie gets around the world twice before the truth puts its pants on in the morning, you know. And that's Mark Twain said that. I mean, 150 years ago. I mean, it's the media is not new what it does. It's just that it does it so much faster now.
Yeah.
And it's hard for people to keep up. You know, I was working on a documentary about 12 years ago about my neighborhood in Detroit where I grew up. And I interviewed a guy that worked at the Dodge Main auto plant on the border of Detroit and Hamtramck. And he was already like 70 at that time, and he was telling me about his father. His father came from Italy and got a job at Dodge Main, which was this automotive plant in the middle of Poletown, this Polish part of Detroit. And when his father, he brought his family over after 2 years to come to America. So he got him in town, and he was all excited to tell his Italian father-in-law that he can speak English. He's learned English from the radio and from the newspapers, and he started speaking English to his father, and his father told him that's Polish, because at that time there were Polish radio stations in Hamtramck and Polish newspapers because it was a Polish community. So you could live in Hamtramck and not speak English, and the only news you could get was the Polish news and media. Yeah. And this guy was hearing that because he was in the middle of Poletown and thought it was English. That's the same thing that happens in social media now, where if all you listen to is your perspective echoed back to you.
Absolutely.
You know, and again, people are likely to resonate with what they already know, more so than new information.
Yeah.
You know, and it just happens at a speed that's really fast now. And that's, you know, it's not just news, it's music, it's everything. It's just hard to keep people's attention because it's just going at such a dizzying pace, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely a lot different than it used to be. And, the speed is different. The manipulation of media and the way lies get spread is not new, but the speed within which someone can have it on their phone, they're holding a phone, and it cracks me. The biggest thing that cracks me up about all the conspiracy theories is this idea of a vaccine with a chip in it, right? It's like I know, people say this to me, and I'm like, you are already carrying around a chip in your pocket,
right?
And that's actually where they are tracking your data,
right? So
why are you afraid of them putting a chip in your vaccine? You think they're going to put a chip into your bloodstream? Like, no, they have it in your pocket already.
But you know, when people are afraid, conspiracy theories give an answer to some. It's a lie usually, but it's an answer. And most people want an answer, even if it's a lie, because the truth that things are much more random and much more chaotic than we like to believe is too hard for most humans to hold in their head.
Yeah.
And the truth is, it is random. I mean, again, COVID-19. Think of the plans people had a year ago. Think of all the bands and people planning their summer tour. Some of the best. I go to one concert a summer because I work usually. I work 4 or 5 nights a week all summer long, and I only go to one concert. I go to see Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi. He's a great band, great musician, but the band is great. And he always has good opening acts, and he usually gets them all up there. By the end of the show, there's 25 people up there playing. And, you know, when my daughter turned me on to Derek Trucks, and he married Susan Tedeschi, who was another artist. And at the time, I told her, they formed a band, and I told her this 8 years ago. I said, you know, you can't stay married if you're in separate bands on separate tours.
Yeah.
And they're having kids too, so they fuse what they're doing. And the truth is, they built a machine that was really good, and it was feeding 12 musicians had a full-time job on that band, and they made a good living, and they did their summer tour. They toured for 7-8 months, and that's gone this year.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it's really hard. As a musician, like one of the first things I was taught in my music business schooling is that you need to have the mindset of an entrepreneur. You need to capitalize on as many revenue streams as possible, because you can't just, so many people have the mindset of, you know, this is my job, this is where I get my paycheck, and like, I'm cool with that, you know, and that's fine. Like, I just have that one revenue stream, and that takes care of all my stuff. When in reality, like, the reality is there's almost unlimited revenue streams out there when you really start diving into it and trying to figure out, okay, where am I going to make my money? And also, a lot of these revenue streams can be residual and like royalties, or like, you know, if you start a podcast, or, you know, things like, or if you have subscription based content like on Patreon or something like that. These are, you know, revenue streams that can last and that don't have anything to do with performing live or doing anything
right.
like
Well,
that.
That's one of the again, artists who figure this out, artists who are paying attention, and they're going to have to do these things to survive. All the things we're talking about in the next 18 months, 2 years, artists that can't figure that out are not going to, it's going to be really rough. And how you teach people to do that, I don't know how you teach people to do that.
Yeah.
But teaching or helping artists learn that they have to be they have to be
one-stop shop.
Well, self-reliant enough to be able to do all these things by themselves. I mean, think about it. You've got 2 degrees in the music business. How many people that you know have that?
Nobody.
So you know a lot more than almost anybody you encounter just off the top. And yet you're taking all that knowledge and applying it to how to in this 2020 digital post-record business, because I don't think we even have a record business anymore, time to make a living. So you're going to have to create new models to do that, and you will, but you've got an advantage over most people because you have knowledge about how to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's me, like, what really worked for me is just having an open mind and pivoting with the times. It's like when I have a master's degree in music business, and I could have pursued any like job in the industry. I could have tried to just be a manager or like a booking agent, or I could have worked at a venue. But I focused on marketing and I focused on social media because I saw that was where the need was. And I knew that if you're a manager or a booking agent, it's hard to make like a decent amount of money up front unless you're managing or booking very successful bands, So, I kind of just saw the need of marketing, and I saw that a lot of artists and myself, I saw it in myself, that was the thing that I needed the most, that I needed that knowledge the most. So that's what I kind of pursued. And then because I saw that gap and I filled it, it led to jobs. It led to this. It led to me working with Grove Studios. It led to me, working with other clients as well. And, I think more people just have to try and be in that mind state of like, okay, how do we pivot instead of looking backwards and watching everything disappear? How do we pivot, try something new? And even create, like, for example, my job with Grove Studios didn't exist. I kind of just, it kind of was created, I talked to Rick. I was like, look, I like marketing, like, and I want to help you guys out. He was like, oh, that's actually kind of what we need, So it literally was created out of thin air from, just trying to pivot and trying to see where the gaps were in the industry and how I could fill those gaps.
Well, in the digital economy we live in now, it affects every business. The gig economy, they call it. That the reality is most people that have a couple jobs. They have 2-3 jobs. They have 2-3 part-time jobs.
Yeah.
Because the full-time jobs, the model we had forever of a full-time job and benefits and all that, that's gone. Yep. So artists are no different than just the average person out there. And the truth is, there's a lot of freedom in a gig economy, because rather than having one job that sucks, you could have 3 jobs that suck, or a couple jobs you really dig, that you do part-time, that you derive income. She's very talented. But, again, she's teaching at a school because she couldn't, it's a gig. It's a way to survive. And if she didn't have that job, she couldn't pursue her life as an artist. Yeah. It's the gig economy thing. She's doing multiple revenue streams to make it,
Yeah.
And that's what we're all trying to do. I'm looking at your worker out there with the helmet behind us there, leaving. Isn't that what they did just in a building here?
Yeah, I think, she was. But, you've always been, like, you've had a great career as a performer. You've been able to, support yourself with gigs in the area. And I understand that, those days it's kind of over with the COVID thing right now. But what helped you build that successful career as a performing artist in this area? Because it is very hard, even once live shows come back and everything, like, it's hard for artists, especially in this area. Me as a rapper, it was always hard for me to get paid gigs. You know what I mean? It was so what worked for you? Well,
I was asked once to do a talk at Wayne State for an art teacher that heard me talking in a coffee shop to a friend of mine's band. And he wanted me to do that talk in front of his class, and I called the talk "The Myth of the Starving Artist." Mm-hmm. My whole life, from the very beginning, I heard you can't make a living in the music business.
Yep.
And even, I mean, my grandmother died thinking I didn't have a job.
Yeah.
I put my kids to private school and college with the crap of a really good ex-wife, good mother, too. She pulled a big part of that wagon. But because, in the Myth of the Starving Artist, I say the key thing is say yes to opportunities.
Yeah.
If you think that I just do this and this is what I do and I do it this way and you're going to buy it this way or you're not going to get anything, you're not going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, I MC, DJ, did all kinds of things. I did websites in the 90s to help promote music. I learned how to do websites because I knew it would help sell music. Artists have to, like anybody else, they have to, if you ever saw the movie Amadeus with Mozart.
Haven't seen it.
Great old movie. And it's a historical fiction. It's true, but it's not. But even great Mozart, the greatest composer of his time, and everyone knew he was the greatest of his time. Mm-hmm. And he had princes back then. If you were really good, you could get a noble to hire you to be the court composer and put you up and give you a good full-time job. But he would do things on the weekends with the common people. They called it vaudeville. That word vaudeville, it's a German word. It means the common people. And he would do these crazy, irreverent Monty Python, Saturday Night Live, comedy, operas, because he got paid to do those. Yeah. It wasn't beneath him. He needed the money. Yeah. And I think you have to say yes to opportunities. Yeah. And you have to be flexible enough to adjust. Things change.
Flexible. I love that. I mean, it points directly back to what we were just talking about revenue streams. I mean, you're a performer. You write your own songs. You do that, but also, you've built websites. You've been a DJ. You've done even other things.
It's saying yes to an opportunity. I mean, I had kids to support, and I knew as the music business locally changed, as I told you before, there used to be so many bars with live bands all over this area. If you could drive from Ypsi, take Ford Road from here all the way down to Dearborn, and you would have every mile a club that had a live band in it. Mm-hmm. That's how it was. Wow. And when you got into Canton, Westland, Livonia, Dearborn, into Detroit, there was like 2-3 bars every block that had live music. There was such a scene in the 70s and 80s that still existed. That's been long gone. Yeah. And so for me in the 80s, again, I had 2 kids in private school, and I saw the band thing. I saw it ending, and I knew that I could not continue to have the quality of band I had and pay them. They wouldn't stick around because they were good. They'd get other gigs. Mm-hmm. And I had to make the band smaller. And then I was a solo act. Most of the last 20 years, I've been a solo act. I've only done a couple band gigs in the last 5 years because there's no money in band gigs.
Yeah, and you can that's why me and I have a guitarist that I work with very closely, and we're working on doing performances with like a loop station because I play drums as well, so I have an electronic drum kit. Right. So we're working on putting together a performance with the loop stations where it's only me and him and we don't need the full band, but we can still lay down the live instrumentation, just the two of us,
Well, it's a funny thing because economics and band size have always gone hand in hand. Yep. Go back to Mozart in those days. When Europe was going, there was like 20 countries that had a lot of money. They had Spain, England, Italy, all these countries that were colonial countries that were taking over the rest of the world. They had a lot of money, so they could afford a 70-piece. Every major city had a symphony, had a noble, a prince who could afford to subsidize an orchestra. Mm-hmm. And so you had great symphonic music. But then when times got hard, chamber music came in, 6 and 8 pieces, smaller things. The big band era in jazz, the golden era, really, truly, the best music ever made in America, maybe in the world, was the era in that 40s to 50s when you had those big bands, great jazz musicians, big bands recording live in a studio, not multi-track, but live. And then guess what? There was a recession in the 50s, and they couldn't afford to make any money with big bands. So and amplifiers came in. So now you could have 4 guys on a stage with amplifiers who could make as much noise as a big band, and it was cheaper. Yeah. So then that became the rage. You've always had to adjust to economics. A musician has always had to figure out a way to get paid. So doing it now small and solo is it's smart because
Yeah.
you won't be if if a band can't work and make money, you won't have a band.
Yeah. And it's always so tough to, get people together for rehearsals every week or whatever.
The song my America song, I mean, I knew when I recorded the rhythm track 2 years ago, and I knew if I was going to record this song, I was going to use the best musicians I knew.
Yeah.
And a couple of my friends, people said, yeah, studio musicians.
Talk about the musicians that you used in the song a little bit.
Right. Well, in 1984, I had a record deal, and I had my best musical friend was a drummer, one of the great drummers ever to come out of Detroit. He's no longer with us, Buster Marbury. Just a great drummer. He worked with the Temptations for like 20-some years before he died in 2009. But in 84, I had a deal, and I had worked with Buster in a band in the 70s. And I had already worked with him before in the best band I ever was in then. And I was going to hire the Hitsville guys, the Funk Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to hire those guys to play with Buster and me in the studio and record the record. And Buster says, man, you know what? I got some dudes that are better than them. And I'm like, who? So the bass player, Giovanni Collier, he was playing bass with Gladys Knight and the Pips at the time. He was young, amazing bassist. And the keyboard player, Leroy Hyder, piano player, he was playing with a lot of gospel people, but he was playing with Orthea Barnes, who was a big Detroit blues jazz singer. And so I trusted Buster, and I took those guys into the studio and made a record in 1984. And, of course, I hired other people to play on that record, but that was the rhythm. I like recording live in a room with a band, if you can. It's the way to do it if you can. Even though nowadays folks don't do that, it's still the best way to do it. So I knew if I was going to make a record, this America song, I was going to record it the best I could with the best musicians I knew. And I had Giovanni Collier. He was on the tour. He's been with Bruce Hornsby the last 22 years. And he was in Chicago with Bruce Hornsby. And Leroy Hyder was in Toledo with some group. I think it was Freddie Jackson on doing a tour. And they were coming home for the 4th of July. Or they weren't going to, but I had them close to Detroit. And I made them a deal that I'd get them home so they could visit. They hadn't played together in 20-some years. Mm-hmm. And I'd bring them to Detroit and record them live in a room. And, of course, Buster had passed away. So I asked them what drummer in Detroit they'd want to work with, and they picked Skeeto Valdez. And Skeeto is one of the best drummers anywhere. I mean, he did a tour in 2006 with what's the guy from Phish, the great guitar player, Craig Anastasia. Mm-hmm. He was working with him in 2006, 2007. He's a great all-around drummer, and they knew him. So I made him the drummer, and I had to find a studio that had a piano, which was really hard because there's no pianos in studios anymore, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But they don't use them. So I brought those cats in to play in the rhythm section, and I worked on the track the rest of the year, finishing. I cut 7 songs that day, but I worked on the America song, and then, of course, I had a stroke a year ago, September 22nd, and, of course, I'm talking really well now, and people think I'm doing great, and I am doing remarkably well because of all the things about healing I know to heal myself. But there's a lot I cannot do, and I couldn't play guitar. I can't play guitar as well now as I used to, and I will eventually get back to that point. It's only been 11 months. I got a ways to go. So I hired a cat. I needed a slide guitar player, and I knew a singer in Bob Seger's band, Sean Murphy, and she's a blues legend in her own right. And I asked her, who's the best slide guitar player you know? And she goes, Rob McNelly. And so she gave me his number, and I called him. And he's a big session guy in Nashville, too. He plays on Blake Shelton, Martin McBride. He plays with everybody. Cool. He's up for they give awards in Nashville for the top session guys of the year, and he's up for Guitar Player of the Year this year in Nashville.
Wow.
And he liked the song.
It's amazing.
And I had played the part before the stroke, but I didn't like what I did. It was a slide guitar part.
Yeah.
And I used to play that style a lot, but it's a touch thing, and I just didn't like what I did. And I decided I was going to hire the best person I could. And the good news of the craziness of the current moment in time is that even the great musicians are out there struggling to make a living. You can get a lot of great people to play on your record.
Yeah.
They need to make a buck, too.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
You're good.
So I hired him to do the slide part, and he did it for me. I sent him the demo, and then I sang what I wanted him to play that wasn't on the demo, and he's a talented enough cat that he played what I sang to him.
Uh-huh.
And then when I got ready to finish it, about 3 months ago, there was one part that wasn't quite right, and I was going to edit in Pro Tools and Frankenstein it, cut and paste it, and do all that crap. And I hate doing that to a talented guy's work.
Yeah.
So I called him, and I said, hey, there's one part that you didn't get right, and if you would redo it, I'd pay you again to redo it with this other part. So he redid it, and he didn't charge me for it the second time. So I had that, and I wanted mandolin in it, and I bought a mandolin last year, but of course I can barely play guitar well now, let alone learn how to play mandolin. And it just so happens one of the best guitar players I've ever known in my life, Al Ayub, right here from Detroit, amazing guitar player, has been the best guitar player I know for 30 years in Detroit. He also is a great mandolin player.
Yeah. And
he works with the DSO. There's a lot of mandolin in classical music, and he does a lot of stuff with the symphony. And I called him, and I said, hey, man, I need this mandolin part, and I figured out how to do it. Matter of fact, I couldn't even figure out how to record because of the stroke. I didn't even know how to get my equipment to work. And I had to go to a studio and play the part on guitar so he could learn on mandolin. And that was and I did the other guitars and stuff before the stroke, and I sang it before the stroke. And I have another dear friend from Detroit, John Yash, a great 8-time Grammy-winning engineer who's from Nashville. He's now in Arizona. He relocated this year. He agreed to mix it. He, in fact, had heard the song a year ago and encouraged me to finish it. Because this is a good song, Joe. You used to finish it, and I'll mix it. And he said, I got really great. And, of course, the vocalist on it, amazing Kimberly Wright out of Flint, Michigan. And I think I always say she's the best singer I know, and not white, black, male, female, or genre specific. She just is a great singer. And I hadn't worked with her in a long time. And I called her and said, I have a part on this song I'd like you to do. And she agreed to do it. And we had masks on at the studio, not when we recorded, of course. And she sang the hell out of the song. So everyone on it is really amazing. And now the song's done, and I did a video for it, and now I'm trying to use all these things that that I know, that we know, that if they all line up properly can create a vibe, a following of people to like the song. And the truth is, I'm not a famous person. I'm an old, irrelevant musical artist that hasn't made a record in a long time. And I would really love an artist that has a bigger following and a bigger reach than I do. I have no reach. Someone that actually has a reach to record the song, because I want the song to do what it's supposed to do, which is try to bring a healing, centrist vibe into this country to come back to the center and heal again, because that's what the country's going to have to do in the coming next couple of years.
Absolutely.
No matter who the president is, the country's got to heal.
Absolutely.
The polarization, it's got to find a way to come to the center, and America's done this many times. There's an old philosophical idea of triangulation. Immanuel Kant articulated triangulation. You have one idea to the left and one idea to the right, and they fight and they polarize, and eventually they whittle themselves down to the things we agree on, and that becomes the paradigm that's true, the one thing we all believe. And that becomes the truth for a while, and then someone polarizes with that truth, and it does the same thing again to triangulate to a new truth.
Yeah. And
this happens all the time through history, and it's happening in America now. And the truth is, I am optimistic that when we will get through this, and we will find a new truth of what America really means and what it really is.
Absolutely.
And we've done it before, and I think we'll do it again. I believe we will. And I'm confident. And my little song is my way of trying to contribute something to the zeitgeist, to say, let's meet in the middle. Let's try to come together. Let's remember what America's really about. Let's take the politics out of it. Let's stick on values. Let's stick on true things we know are true, and begin again to rebuild this country. And I'm optimistic that we will. And it's like they say, nobody wants to watch you make sausage. It's an ugly process to watch people make sausage. But everyone loves sausage, right?
Yeah.
But it's ugly. It's ugly.
For sure.
It's ugly to watch it be manufactured.
Yeah, and I think that, yes, we're in terrible times right now, but also sometimes sometimes the negative things have to be brought to the surface to be eliminated. If the negative things are always below the surface and always kind of hidden in the background, then it's hard to deal with them.
Yeah, well, they say nothing. The old adage is there's no better antiseptic than sunlight. You bring things out of the dark and into the sun.
Yep.
And this has been true for all of time. So it's whether someone's in therapy personally trying to resolve a problem, or a culture is having a nervous breakdown, if to bring the truth to the table is the only place you can begin to heal something.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. It's crazy to a lot of my friends that the racism and stuff that we've seen in the country emerge.
It's ridiculous.
Because I worked with black artists most of my career in the 60s and 70s and 80s, I saw I saw a racism I didn't even really know existed. So the reality is, having it come to the surface, it gives us the chance to address it again. And
Absolutely.
It's painful and it's difficult, but you know, again, if you can get back to the things we agree on, and back to what you know, my least favorite thing that people say is, let's agree to disagree.
Yeah.
I hate that. Or it is what it is.
Yeah.
I hate those two things. Don't ever say that shit to me, either one of those things. And I'll say, yeah, that's true about, you know, what coffee you like better, or what's your favorite singing group. When it comes to morality and ethics and principles, there are right and wrongs. There are truths and untruths.
Absolutely.
And at a certain point, it takes a ridiculous idea to get you to see the truth clear. You know, because you can compare it to it. You can look at it and go, well, that's crazy, and this is truer. And, you know, the Founding Fathers, it's in the documents, to move towards a more perfect union. They knew it wasn't perfect when they created this country. And they knew that what they created, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the idea of America was, they knew that it was just an idea that would be really hard to even happen. So it was the beginning of moving towards a more perfect union.
Yeah.
So every time we have a crisis in this country, you know, the Revolutionary War was a crisis, the Civil War was a crisis, you know, the Great Depression was a crisis, the 60s were a crisis, we're in a crisis again. And I really do believe it's an opportunity to create a more perfect union again.
Yeah, opportunity for growth, for sure.
For growth, and to learn, and to grow a level and learn something new. And I have hope that humans have always found a way to do that. And my song was a love song, I say, to America, to say that, you know, we can begin again, to remember what was really true and start again. And that's what we're going to have to do. And again, that my little song could have any positive effect on it is, I know it's a grandiose idea, but you know, music is supposed to change the world.
And it certainly is a song that, if and when it is put in front of millions of people, it will have that effect, because you put that energy in there. And I mean, it really speaks to like the musicians that you used on the track, the person that mixed it, you know, where you recorded it. It really, I mean, it sounds incredible.
Well,
so
people always ask me, you know, like it's funny because I haven't made a real record in 20 years because it costs money.
Oh, so expensive.
You know, so you know, a lot of my friends, matter of fact, Rick Grove, the founder here, Rick Coughlin, I met him at his sister. I was DJing his sister's wedding.
Oh, that's where you guys met?
And that's where I met him. I met him at his sister's wedding. And we were talking about this 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And talking about music. And he saw me as a DJ. I didn't sing or play at that gig. I had my guitar, but I didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of my followers, even that come and see me in clubs, I don't do a lot of original songs in my gig because I know that's not what the bar owner wants me to play. Mm-hmm. And I'm flexible. You know, okay, you want cover tunes? Okay, I'll do what I do, and that's what I do. But a lot of people just didn't even know that I write and record songs. And so I've had a lot of musicians contact me, young guys, in the last couple months, saying, wow, man, what's the secret? And I say, it's really simple. You start with a really good song.
Yeah.
You get a really great song. And if you can't write one, you find one. And the truth is, everybody's not a great songwriter.
Yeah.
And this is something that the old music business did better than the new music business does, is everyone's not a great writer. In fact, great writers are rare.
Yeah.
And so, but now, you know, with digital technology and with auto-tune and all these things, now you can have a crappy song and a crappy singer and make a better sounding record. But, you know, the old adage is you can't polish a turd.
No
matter how hard you rub on it. And you know, that's one of the biggest challenges, is just writing a good song.
Yeah. Know? And I think that is something that, you know, artists should focus on really strongly, because that's something that, you know, when I started making music, when I was, you know, 17, started writing. When I was 18, I started producing, you know, and I'm 28 now, but like I was not writing good songs when I first started. I had to put that time in, and put the effort in and put the practice in to even get to the point where I could write a good song.
You know, getting back to Barry Strong, the Motown writer, you know, I used to do demos, guitar demos for him, $35 a song, and play on his demos after Motown. And he used to always just tell me, because I was at that point a young man who was writing songs, and he'd say, And I'd ask him, what's the secret to write? And he's written a dozen songs that that were big hits. He said, well, you got to write a lot of bad songs to learn how to write a good song.
Absolutely.
And that's the key. You practice, you do it, you learn, you get better at it. And, and the feedback loop, the hope is without people, you can't really know how good your song is because people like it and it resonates or it does not. And it's not about selling out. It's about, it's funny because because my background is in songs, not in jamming or whatever, I know that you have to find a good song. You have to have a good singer sing it. If that ain't you, find a good singer. You have to have a good producer, know how to arrange that song, and good musicians that can play that arrangement, and then good engineers to record that arrangement, and then a great engineer to mix that arrangement. It requires every step of the way good people, but it starts with a good song.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a hard thing to get to the point without audience feedback. When you sing a song and people respond to it, that's when you know it's a good song.
Yeah.
And a lot of artists, it's funny, I had a record I did in 2008, a soundtrack for an astrology movie. I'm an astrologer, that's my day job. And there's a famous astrologer in Detroit that's a wannabe musician, and he knew me as a musician, but he didn't know I was an astrologer too.
Yeah.
And I made this record in my house for like $1,500, and I hired a couple people, but not good people because I couldn't afford them, and I had to get it done for a movie really fast. I had 6 weeks to finish the whole thing. And when he heard the record, he goes, "You can't be a singer-songwriter." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because you sing too good." And he's thinking you got to be Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
You got to be a bad singer to write good songs, and that's just not true. You want the best singer to sing the best song you have.
Yeah. And you're definitely an extremely good singer, and it comes from many, many, many hours of putting the work in, huh?
And again, I was fortunate. I was never in rock bands. I played with soul groups. From the time I was about 18 years old. And so I played with great singers. I was playing behind great singers. And I worked with David Ruffin, the guy that sang My Girl, one of the greatest soul singers ever to live. May he rest in peace. He's no longer with us. But you stand up there with that guy for 80 shows and you sing along with him. And I was singing background, because that was part of the gig. You play guitar and sing background vocals. But you learn by osmosis, by just being on stage with a great singer. And I worked with a lot of great singers. And because soul music itself is vocal-centric, it's about the singer singing the song. And even making a record, a lot of rock musicians I know who never had that kind of experience. Great guitar player. I know a lot of great guitar players that are awful accompanists because they don't know that the song is the singer singing that song.
Yeah.
And how even the same with the rapper. The song is that rapper. So how can the musicians or the music elevate that message up a bit? And a lot of musicians never learn that that's the role of playing on somebody's song, even on your own song.
Yeah.
Is play things that'll elevate that song. And I was very fortunate to work with great singers and to, work with producers. Even though I didn't work with any great producers when I was young, they were all pretty bad. And I became a producer because of that, because I could get it done, and it was easier. Once the management saw I could do it without them, they pushed those guys, and plus they could screw me out of more money too.
Yeah.
But it's you practice, you work hard at it, and you hope that the gods smile on you and that you do something that touches people, And you never know. That's the catch-22 of art. You think of those cave paintings in France.
Yeah.
Everyone marvels at those cave paintings. Well, if no one ever found those cave paintings, if those were never discovered, they'd just be in some dark-ass wall somewhere. And no one could say they're great because no one ever saw them. Art requires the participation of the audience.
For sure.
And that's how you know. And it's not to be commercial. It's to say, I want a song to resonate with as many people as possible. And how do I present that song? That's what production really is. Presenting the song in a way that highlights the singer and the message, and that resonates with. And it's not about the lowest common denominator. It's about an inclusive thing to try to get the most people to want to feel the message you're trying to say. And some people call that selling out. I call that buying in. Because if people can't sing your song, matter of fact, Mozart, Amadeus, there's a key scene where he's at this vaudeville thing playing for these drunk, half-naked people, and the favorite part of the song is just like it is now, the la 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 la. You think of all these songs, whoa whoa, You know, these nonverbal drunk people like songs without lyrics. They like noises.
Yeah.
And people in church, you know, hallelujah. They like stuff. They can't sing anything else but that one thing. That's a nonverbal sound, you know.
Yeah.
Do I diddy diddy dum diddy do, you know. Brown eyed girl, sha la 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 la. People love that because they can sing along with it.
It's not hard to remember.
Yeah, and it can be done as a device that's very obnoxious as it is. There's a group, what's the name of that song? Was a huge hit. I do the song, in fact. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What's that song? Because the guy was on American Idol. And I learned the song because it was a big hit, and I do cover tunes in the bar gig. But that song had that thing I just sang. And since that time, that's like 10 or 12 years ago, there's been like 50 hits that have that. Because, again, every generation learns this again, that these songwriters have been trying for as long as they've been writing songs to do that thing. And, you know, I've had a couple people with this song even say to me that the production, they love the production, and they say, but it's almost too perfect. Like everything just belongs. Yeah, I said, well, that's the idea, is you want to arrange it. You know, the 8-time Grammy winner, John Yash, that mixed the song, he'll tell you the secret to a good mix is a good arrangement. Yeah. If a song is well arranged, where the parts are where they belong and everything has its own sonic space to live, and they don't crowd the vocal and they embrace the vocal, to mix that is easy. You still don't know what you're doing, but you've already half the battle is done. And a lot of young bands, you know, they'll have 2 guitar players and a bass player and a singer, and they'll all kind of play the same thing. And when you're mixing it, you can't even pull the guitars apart because they're in the same range even, you know? Yeah. And a great guitar player that hit the funk. If you ever see the movie Standing in the Shadows of Motown about the Funk Brothers, Joe Messina, he was the Italian cat, great guitar player, still alive. I did his birthday party a couple years ago. He would break down the Motown. He was the guy that would arrange the 3 guitars on all the songs. And he was a jazz cat. He played with John Coltrane. He could play anything. And the 3 guitar players knew that if they all played in the same range, it would be muddy. But if each guy had its own sonic space, one guy played a little high-end thing, one guy played a thing in the middle, and one guy played something below that, each guitar part would live in the mix where it's supposed to be. And I learned that from him. You know, there's a real famous song by the Supremes, Love Child. It was a huge, it was one of my favorite Motown songs, the Diana Ross and Supremes. And if you listen to the guitar first, 3 guitar parts, and they ring because they're in different ranges. Joe Messina arranged the guitar parts with the other 2 guitar players, so they all had their own sonic space. So, you know, the band that played on those Motown records, they were arranging the music as they were recording because they were all badass dudes. They were great. And that's one of the reasons those records were hits.
And filling those sonic space, I mean, that's such important knowledge for a producer nowadays, too, is like if you can use sounds that exist in their own sonic spaces, the mixing process is going to be a hell of a lot easier.
It's like an orchestra. You know, you have all these 70 instruments, and of course, usually they're in sections, so you'll have 5 or 6 parts that are being distinctly played, from a bassoon on the bottom to a piccolo and the highest violins. But if you had them all playing in relative range, it would just be a wall of noise. But when you have them in, the classical composers figured that stuff out in the 17th century. They figured out how to do that. And, you know, the old mixers, when you go to the Motown Hitsville, if you ever get to go there, I think they still have that original mixer there. They didn't have parametric EQ back then. They had shelving EQ. So you could basically have high, mid, low. It was a switch. And that's what you could do to any track. You could make it higher, mid, low. That's all you could do there. You couldn't fine tune it and dial it in. That wasn't until parametric EQs weren't invented until the 80s. So, you know, when that's all the equipment you have, and you have 7, 8, 10 guys in a room, you don't fix that in the mix. In the arrangement, you fix it. Yeah. So each guy's parts pops out in its own range. And good musicians that know it's a song behind a singer, they don't have to be even told. They'll naturally do that. That's one of the reasons the Hitsville guys were so good, is they played on so many records. They had a formula, if you will, but they knew how to get out of the way of the song, and to arrange the track so that. And back then they didn't have 48 tracks or 24 tracks. It was all done on 4 or 8 tracks. Yeah, the arrangement's everything. And I'm thankful I had that experience because it taught me a lot about in my own music to not overdo things and to sometimes one note is going to cut through better than 3 notes on a guitar, because it's got its own little space to live. And when you work with loops and stuff, and there's like a lot of great artists who work with loops and do some amazing things with loops, and I'm not nothing against loops or whatever, if that's what you used to do. But even with loops, finding loops that have their own space.
Yeah.
And it's that one thing opens the mix up better than anything else you could do because each thing lives in its own area. It's got its own range to be,
Absolutely. And you've definitely had a lot of experience, like playing with some bands that have, had some big records, and you've toured the world. What are some of those bands? Talk about that experience a little bit. Your touring days back in the day. What was that like?
Back then, because I was never with when you have a hit record, the world changes, and it's true. It's true for Billie Eilish as it's true for the Floaters in 1977.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, in one day, you go from nobody to somebody, and of course, you don't have the money to compete, but you get booked to do gigs. We would do gigs. We opened for the Commodores, the Emotions, LTD, all these great 70s soul groups of that era. Solomon Burke, Bobby Blue Bland, the Dells, Four Tops, Temptations, of course, played with them too. But we'd pull up to a place like, whatever the big concert venue is now downtown. They tore down Joe Louis, so Cobo Hall or wherever the biggest venues are, Pine Knob, DTE Theater. And they'd have, all the other bands had buses. We'd have a station wagon with a U-Haul trailer,
Mm-hmm.
loading our stuff into a gig to get up and play on stage.
Yeah.
And it's, there's nothing like standing in front of 40,000 or 30,000 people and playing, but it's a very surreal thing. And at a very early, for me, I felt a big disconnect. Even at a really early, I would never go out into the audience after the show. A lot of the cats would go out there. I took up girls. I was never comfortable out in the squash of people. I didn't like that.
Yeah.
But you learn a lot from getting to do that. I got to play Carnegie Hall with the Floaters opening for the Manhattans. I got to play
that's awesome.
the Apollo Theater with the Floaters opening for another group in the 70s. Places I never would have played alone by myself,
Yeah.
And there's all over the country, big venues. It's just crazy what a hit record will do for you. It changes everything. And I was fortunate to be at the right place at the right time. I was young. My band that played on the record were all in high school still, and a lot of them couldn't even go on the road.
Wow.
And I had already dropped out of school because I didn't care about that. And of course, I went to a very violent school in Detroit, and I started skipping school because I just I was not a violent person. I couldn't hang with that.
Yeah.
And I was willing to go on the road because I didn't have anything to lose. And I said yes, And I hired some of the best guys in Detroit at that time to teach me how to be a better musician. Because
cool.
I had a gig, they were more than happy to come along,
Yeah.
And I always joke when I just spoke to their manager, the guy from the Detroit Emeralds the other day, James Mitchell, and I said, man, I was just lucky that those guys were too stupid to not hire a qualified person for that gig. But I learned a lot working with good people, and being on the road is a very hard life too.
Oh yeah, I think people it's always glorified by a musician until you actually have the experience and realize how expensive and how tough it really is being on the road.
Just life, traveling. My nephew's band, The Donkey, that had a lot of success 10 years ago, and are still a viable group out there in the world. But they're all, turning 40, and they don't want to. They would do a tour every summer. They would go on the road with 2 cars and a trailer, and they had a record that was pretty big, and yet they still had to go out and live like that and play small clubs. And they'd go all across. They would do a tour every summer, 40, 50 dates in 60 days. And if it doesn't kill you, and
makes
you
you stronger.
I guess, but it's not a real life that anybody should have to live. Even if you're flying around in jet airplanes and stuff, and even if you're flying first class, it's still you're not home.
Oh, and and it's so tough on your body, and and I think a lot of people just don't realize touring is very expensive. If you're not making money at your gigs, if you're not bringing in, the paper, you're going to be paying out of pocket thousands and thousands of dollars just to try and get you around the country.
Well, I'll tell you, even when I worked with groups and money was not the problem, I got paid very well to tour with any of those groups. That they pay you a salary, it was a good wage. They paid for your hotel and they paid for your food and all that. The biggest, hardest thing is you're alone.
Yeah.
No one's going to take care of you on the road.
Mm-hmm.
You're on your own. And there may be 10 guys in the band, but each guy's on his own.
Yeah.
And each girl is on her own. And that is the biggest, hardest lesson. And it's why a lot of folks go off the rails, because a lot of people cannot take care of themselves. A lot of folks can't handle alone.
Yeah.
And on the road, you're alone. You may be in a bus with 10 people, but you're still alone. You're on your own. If you get sick, if something happens, you're the only person who's going to fix that.
Yeah.
And it's a hard life. Giovanni Collier, the great bassist that played on my record, that's Bruce Hornsby's bassist, that works with Bella Fleck, works with a lot of people, was Gladys Knight's bassist. 10 years ago, when my Buster Marbury, the drummer, passed away in 2009, and we were talking about how hard it is to be a musician.
Yeah.
Even the best musicians.
Mm-hmm. It's
not a natural lifestyle. You work nights, you travel, you work intermittently. You make, if you're lucky, like in his case, he works with Bruce Hornsby, so he does a tour every summer, which he's not doing this year. And he gets paid a good living to go out there on the road. And because he's with someone famous, he gets other gigs in L.A. He lives in L.A. and he can work and he plays all the time. But it's the music, to be in the business, unless you're like, again, at the ultra high level, it's more of a vocation than a job. You got to love it enough to want this to be your life.
It's a 24/7 gig.
It is. And if you can't, and that's the difference of a vocation and a job. A job is just a way to make money. A vocation is, this is what I do. This is who I am.
Yeah.
And I'll take all the things that come with it to do it. And I don't know. I think it's changed a lot in the last 20, 30 years, and particularly right now, and not even with COVID-19, but just how hard it is to go on the road and make a living, for a band to even do that. And most bands don't have the resources. You mentioned coming out of your pocket. Most bands don't have a pocket.
No, for sure. And the thing is if you're a band and you're touring, if you're touring bars, if you're not bringing out 50 to 100 people at each stop, you're going to be in the hole, Yeah. And so how do you bring out those 50 to 100 people and get them to pay $20 for a ticket? And then once you figure that out, you'll have a little bit easier of a time.
That's true, but there's 1,000 bands out there. If this podcast were on a major streaming service, who would say, "Wow, how do you do that? How do you get 50 people to come out to see you every town?" It's not easy. It's a hard gig. It's a hard thing to do. But artists, if it's what you're meant to do, if music's what you're here to do. I never took any lessons. I'm self-taught. I have people all the time that come to me and go, "My kid wants to play." I said, "Let him do it. If it's meant to be his thing, he'll do it. If it's not, he won't."
Yeah.
And then once you get out into the marketplace, if you can't make a living after a couple of years, God's telling you this isn't your job. You can still do it, but do this for money and do that for joy. And that's not a sellout or a compromise either,
No, and just like me, like I'm doing marketing and social media for money right now, but that's because, and I'm doing it to, obviously live, but also, I need money to promote my next 10 songs. I have 10 songs lined up. I need money to promote it. You know what I mean? Well, so the money is a big part of it.
And also every time you get hired by a client and you get to go out into the world and do something like that, you learn something you can use for your own song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And that's how are we doing on time here?
Yeah, we're good.
We're all over the place with this talk. Well, I tell you, leave with this. It's important to say this. For me, at a very young age, I knew when I was 13, 14, I was a musician, and that was that.
Mm-hmm.
And once I knew that, it was okay. Now, how do I make a living doing this? And what do I do? And I read a lot. I've always been an avid reader, and I hoped and I prayed and I put myself in situations where opportunities happened for me, and I was lucky to have those breaks. But the reality is, I knew it was what I was here to do, and I always had my deal with the universe was, okay, if you support me, then this is what I'm supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And if you don't support me, I'll get a job doing something else. Mm-hmm. I just talked to a guy in 1983, the only real job I ever had. I quit then because I got a record deal. I was married, and I had a budget to make a record, and I quit the job to try music one more time. And I had a deal with his dad, the owner of the company, that if it didn't work out, I'd come back in a year. And I knew the day that I left there, I'd never go back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, 1983. That's 37 years ago.
Yeah.
And I never went back. And I adjusted many times. I never got a hit record. I never got famous. I never got the perks or whatever people think it's all about. But I got to perform 4 or 5 nights a week and play for people. And I got to do what I know I was here to do. And if that's not part of the package for somebody, they're in the wrong business.
Yeah.
Because you make a lot of sacrifices to be an artist in any medium, whether it's music or it's writing or it's sculpting or it's whatever you do, painting. You're going to make sacrifice. You're going to have a different life than your peers. And the odds are you're not going to become a millionaire doing it. So if you don't really love it, and if you don't know that it's what you're here to do, you won't do it.
Yeah.
And so people that stick with it, and it's funny because if you don't stick with it, you don't get the breaks, you don't get the fortune.
Yep.
If you don't stick with it, but those people stick with it because of the passion and the love. They know this is who I am and what I'm here to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest thing. Anybody listening up there, and a young person that plays music, is if you're doing it for the fantasy of becoming a rock star, that's great. I hear that a lot when I was gigging. Up until I had the stroke, I gigged all the time. And I would talk to a young guy and he'd go, yeah, man, I want to go on the road and have roadie. They'd see me moving my stuff into a gig. I'm the roadie too.
Yeah.
And they'd say, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to have road. I'm going to have roadies. I said, well, that's cute. And I said, so if you're lucky enough to get a hit record and have roadies, that's great for that 2 years.
Yeah.
And then what after that? Are you still going to play music when your hit's not a hit? When you can't do tours and you got to work locally? What are you going to do? Are you going to stick with it or do something else?
Yeah.
And that's how you know that it's what you're meant to do. And there's no knock on deciding it's not my thing to do. My nephew that's with the Donkey, that San Diego band, they're all hitting 41, 42, and they had a bunch of success 10 years ago, and they've been hanging on and going forward. But some of them have kids and they're married, and they're phasing out of doing it anymore. And I just talked to him about it. I said, if you're an artist, and he is a true artist, he'll find a way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, just find your passion and follow it,
And be flexible enough and humble enough to do all kinds of gigs, not just, I told you about the myth of the starving artist talk. I used to say if you're a painter and you got to buy paint and canvas and an easel, so you might have to paint a house to get the money to do that, or paint a sign to get the money to get your tools. So, don't sit around waiting for lightning to strike to get the perfect thing. The time is now to do the best you can do with what you have. And if it's your mission and it's your path and it's you're here to do, you'll do it. And just get out of your own way and go forward the best you can.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you, Jotown, so much for coming on Grove Sessions. This was a great talk. Can't wait to have another one with you. And,
thanks for having me. I really appreciate you and Rick taking the time to listen to my story. And then it's looking, what kind of America do we want to be? It's on YouTube. It's on iTunes. It's on, wait a minute now, Spotify.
It's going to be up on Spotify, all platforms.
All platforms.
Yep,
You can find it on YouTube and check it out. I did the video with a bunch of other talented people. And give it a listen. And I hope that it makes you believe that we're going to make it through this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And also go to www.jotown.com. That's JOTOWN.com. That's Jotown's website. You can find everything Jotown there. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been Grove Sessions. My name's Max Price with Jotown. We are out.
How long? That was an hour and a half? How long was that?